Ja. So, welcome everyone to this panel about working as a game dev. And with me I have some, of course, fantastic game devs who's here to tell you how amazing it is to work as a game dev. My name is Tao Peterson. I'm the community overlord at Sweden Game Arena. So my work here is to create stuff like this to make sure you feel that Skövde is the place to be, or Västra Götalandsregionen, as a game dev and as an upcoming game dev. We hope to be able to shed some light on some questions you have today. Feel free to ask questions in the chat during the panel, and we have fantastic Vanya there relaying them to us. So hopefully you'll get your answers today. But that's me. Now let's talk to all panelists. Let's start with Anton. Who are you? What do you do? And how did you get here?
Well, as stated, my name is Anton. I work in Skövde at Pieces Interactive as a 3D environment artist. And I've been working at Pieces for 3 years now. Started out at the university in 2013. And, well, I've been in Skövde ever since. So I don't know how in-depth we want to go with this. But
how big is Pieces?
Pieces, we're around 30 people at the moment. We're currently growing slowly but surely. It's easier now when people are working from home because you don't have to accommodate them in an office space. The problem that will bite us in the butt later, I think, when people want to return to the office.
Yeah, I think other companies, I mean, a lot of companies in Skövde is expanding right now, or in the game dev business overall, and I think a lot of them will have this issue concern. Also, when it feels like we need a bit more space in between people and stuff like that, and we won't be as comfortable being as cramped, I think, after this pandemic. But we'll see. Okay, let's go to Agnar.
Yes, hello. My name is Agnar. I am a technical designer over at Thunderful Skövde. I guess I started my game dev journey 2015 when I applied to the university here. I studied game programming. From there, I was involved in 2 startups. I worked on 2 separate games for these startups, which eventually became my sort of entryway into getting hired first at what was then Guru Games, which was then bought up by Thunderful and transformed into what is now Thunderful Skövde. And so Thunderful is actually a pretty big company. We have offices all over Sweden, in Malmö, Karlshamn, Göteborg, Skövde as well. So there's quite a lot of teams and stuff going on, and Skövde is like one of the newer additions. So it's interesting to be like in a super large company, but still in a sort of smaller scope here in Skövde.
Cool. Tobias?
My name is Tobias, and I started studying here back in 2009. And I started my career at Stanlock Studios about 2013, I think, and I worked there on primarily battle rights. So was with with Stanlock Studios during that whole period, and I'm a programmer, by the way, so that's my main focus. And I worked at Stanlock until 1.5 years ago, approximately, and then I started my own company with a friend, and I'm the CEO now, so that feels weird. But I've been with Stanlock most of my time, and I think that should be it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so you all started after university at different companies, but also as a startup. But is there anything you got surprised about when it came to your the first company you started working at that you didn't expect for a game dev company?
We should start.
Oof.
I have something that I was surprised by, and I don't know if it's a good thing, maybe good and bad thing, but you really get used to, with schoolwork, you get used to documenting or writing blog diaries and stuff, and writing different kind of papers on what you do in school. Even though it might be like straight up making a game, you have to write something about it for school purposes. And that thing just stripped away instantly was kind of weird to me. The first time I was like, oh, I don't have to do all this stuff. I just can make games now. That was kind of positive, but it also has the backside of being generally less documentation than you maybe think is going to be the case. So that was a bit of a, I didn't realize how less documentation there were around what you do at some stages.
It's like as a
Cool.
designer,
Agnar,
it's like
do you have any?
it was just as a designer, it's like not documenting stuff, especially from a programming perspective, where it seems so like yeah, of course it's obvious how they should work, and then a designer comes and like looks at it and it's just, what am I doing? What am I looking at? So I feel like documenting stuff is a very good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it's a good thing, and and I'm not throwing my like Starlight Studios under the bus. It's just, I feel like that's just a little bit less of it than you expect in a lot of cases. And for me, it was actually quite liberating. So for me, it was kind of positive, because then you can just go fast forward. But and that's the good thing sometimes. Also, you get really high speed in development when you focus more on that than documentation.
More focus on production. But from my end, it was I guess more of a general thing, but for many, it's like before you properly get into the game industry, there's often an illusion of like everyone knows what they're doing, and once you're in a company, and once you're in a games company, then yeah, I know how to make games, and I know how to do this stuff, and I know how to, I don't know, develop a MOBA from scratch or whatever. But that's so far from the truth. But it's liberating in a way, because like I guess you're more open with, and you can be more open with just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm so still, I have to learn it. We're making this thing now, so I'm gonna learn it, and we have to like just work it out. But yeah, this thing of people don't necessarily always know what they're doing, but then that's fine. Like what I was, I guess, most surprised by, but also in a pleasant way, I think.
Anton, do you have anything?
Yeah. I thought long and hard about this, but I actually couldn't come up with any surprising things that I experienced when I started working, as opposed to studying or anything else. But I do have to say that I resonate very much with what both Tobias and Agnar has talked about, like stripping the entire school work part of development and focusing on producing things was a big step up in terms of just developing games and taking part of the production, especially as an artist, because as an artist, you're like way in the nitty-gritty and doing things. And as Agnar pointed out, documentation is still important, of course, especially like we're working with very specific workflows, for example, that utilize different parts of engines and whatnot. And having that written down for new artists is a very good thing. And yeah, like Agnar said as well, figuring things out and defining workflows and who does what and how things work, it's always an uphill battle, pretty much. Everybody's like questioning what's the most efficient way to do things, or how you should go about doing certain things.
Can I add something?
Yeah, of course.
So the thing about figuring stuff out, and like people don't really know sometimes what they are doing. They're just trying and learning. Mm-hmm. I feel like, especially me, when I went back in 10 years ago, it was a lot less resources online. It was a lot. Of course, it was still the internet, so you could still find a lot of stuff. But like these 5 different video tutorials on how you do exactly this thing in Unity, that didn't exist at all. Mm-hmm. So I feel like we all can appreciate, I guess, that we started in a way that it's totally fine to be not that knowledgeable about specific things in a certain area, because it's so easy to get the information. I feel like it's more valuable to be able to use the internet and stuff and the people around you to your advantage to learn and to really go forward fast with the like top-down learning. Like, oh, I need to do this specific thing. Let's try to figure out everything that falls into place because I need to know this. And I feel like we sort of in a time where it's probably quite different from like 15, 20 years ago, but we should use it as much as possible, like be okay that we can just figure it out. Let's just go.
Google is your friend.
Yes.
There's no shame in relying on other people's knowledge and relying on whatever people have paid.
Somewhere down the line, someone has had the exact same problem and asked themselves the exact same questions. And they have worked hours tirelessly trying to figure it out, and now you can take part of that.
Yeah, and the internet is almost always better than you at figuring stuff out. So it's just like, oh, internet says this. This is probably the best way to do it.
It's like collective learning, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. But
Cool.
no surprises.
No surprises. It was just as you expected when you went from school to starting. Yeah, smooth sailing. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go. Our next question is, what does a day at work look like for you?
All right, I'll start again.
Go right
Since, yeah. I'm gonna go back and remember a usual day at Stanlock because it's much more representative than my current work days. But at Stanlock, it was getting to your computer and trying to figure out where you were the last day, and sometimes you're obsessed with the problem the whole day and night, and when you wake up you still have it ingrained in you. So when you go, you know exactly what line of code you want to write as soon as you turn on the computer. That's sometimes the case, but it is also you have a rev up time, starting to get, oh right, that was the problem yesterday and blah blah blah, like that. And then often for me it was having bouncing ideas of colleagues throughout the day was very important. At least those times where you had access to it. You need to respect other people's time sometimes also. And then, yeah, I usually just crunched at the problem, and I wasn't really that much involved in the meetings at Stanlock. I think other people had that. So it was usually just trying to get up and running, and getting deep into the problem. That's a very important part about your schedule. I feel like a programmer, because it's such a big step to okay, now I'm going to deep dive into this. Close the room, maybe lock it, maybe something like that. Let's go. And having that sort of rhythm in your day was very important. Yeah, other than that, it's not really much difference the rest of the day for me. Usually was just working the whole day, and the normal breaks, trying to take a break at least once an hour or something like that. So, but yeah, I realize now that it sounds kind of just exactly the same during the whole day, and that's the only thing you do, and it's maybe some people would characterize it as boring, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So yeah, that was a typical day for me as a programmer.
What was your role at Stanlock, and which parts of the games did you work on? Were you a gameplay programmer or a server?
No, I was kind of in between sometimes. I was tools and systems developer, I would say, and also I had a flirt with VR for a while there, where I made a lot of tools for battery rights for VR. It's tricky to explain, but I was primarily this. Yeah, that's a good question, by the way. That's sort of explores a little bit more. So designers would come to me and say oh, this doesn't work, or this doesn't work as I expected it, or whatever, or I want to do this without so much code, or I want to do this at all. They had some sort of problem where they might be able to figure out themselves, and sometimes they do, but they maybe should have asked me. And sometimes they just come and I don't know how to do this. Maybe we can make a system, and then I would come up with an idea, and we would basically just like on the fly, like incorporate it sometimes into schedule and stuff like that. And sometimes it was a big meeting, but usually that was sort of the loop. Designers came to me and like asked, or of course there were like specific things that was already planned that just was on a to-do list. But that's sort of a more of a dynamic thing that I think a lot of tools and system developers are going to encounter. Some other person who has a need, but not really the technical know-how to implement it. They come to you and you work out, and you always have a good dynamic discussion. It's super important to be able to understand each other and like realize what we are actually talking about, what the problem actually is. And then having that, so that would always like come and go most weeks, that type of conversation. Sometimes a whole day could be just gone in just discussions about a feature with a designer or another person in the studio. So that was a big part of a typical day.
Cool. So that's a day of Tobias' life. Anyone wanna follow up?
I could follow up on that. For me as an artist and at Pieces, we start every day off essentially with a morning meeting where everybody is caught up on any news, what's going on, what's the state of development, if there's any big news going on, and then everybody grabs a cup of coffee and gets to work pretty much. When I sit down at my computer in the morning, I just start up all the programs that I use, and I check the plan laid out by my lead artist, because there's always been planning done for the next milestone, and we as a team have to reach those milestones and deliver upon them. So there's a lot of like time allocation, how much time can I put down on this specific asset, in which cases can I rebalance the time that I've been allotted for every asset depending on how fast I am personally. There's a lot of back and forth between the lead and us as artists when it comes to what takes time and what requires more time, what requires less time, that kind of stuff. But yeah, like Tobias said, it's hard to like pinpoint the specific things because there's always a new challenge with every asset, every environment that we build, depending on what is asked for from the level designers, the concept artists, all kinds of stuff like that. So above all, I would say that it is a very fast changing job. There's a lot of different challenges that you have to adapt to as a game developer in general, I assume, but as an artist, definitely. Yeah.
You're an environmental artist. Which parts do? You get a concept and then you do it all? Who puts it in the engine? Is it you?
Generally, the way we do it is we take assets from concept to in-engine ready assets. So I do modeling, texturing. To some extent, I set up shaders and materials. I set dress. We do have a lighting artist who puts down all the lighting, stuff like that. Generally, the pipeline looks, it's like first we go through design, level design. They block out every level, make sure that we have a theme, and that the gameplay works the way they want it to in the level. Then they send it to the concept artists who has to interpret that or put their block level through the filter of this theme that we have decided upon. And they will make concepts for assets that are then sent to us. We create them in 3D, we texture them, we set up materials, put them into the engine following the block level, and then we send that on to the lighting artists, the tech artists, stuff and they work their magic. Welcome back, Tobias. Then, of course, every once in a while, there is also a playtest to make sure that everything looks and feels right, everything works the way it's supposed to. And then it's an iterative process. It can go back and forth a few times before everything is nailed down to the point where everybody's happy.
Who decides when you're happy enough?
I would say that is up to the art director and the lead artist, in our case at least. And then, of course, we are also working towards a publisher, and they have to take part of our deliveries and what we have created, and they also give their feedback on pretty much every facet of the game.
Cool. Well, Agnar,
Yes.
technical designer, what are you up to?
Tech designer. So yeah, are we talking like pre-pandemic or post? It's a bit of a difference when it comes to like starting up in the pandemic, and it's just like get out of bed, walk to the computer, start up the meeting, and
Well, we can
a bit of a
start
different flow.
Yeah, we can start at where you actually start working, maybe not the
gotcha.
whole day of being sad that you can't go out and meet nice people.
Yeah. But yeah, we have in Thunderful, we have our morning meeting where basically everybody just goes through what they're going to do this day and what they did the last day. Classic stand-up meeting. And then we sort of, I guess, we hop on our assigned tasks. And for me, as a technical designer, it sort of depends on the task, but most of the times, especially now that we're working on like a new project and sort of pre-production phases, it's a lot of theoretical stuff, but then we also have to test that out. So the loop for me is, for starters, like get down the theoretical idea, write down what I want to do, or maybe sketch it out or do whatever, and then hop into the engine, try and get it some sort of working somehow, and then you test and you get feedback. So most of the times I pass it off to my lead designer or pass it off to somebody else in the team and just like, what do you think of this? How does it feel? And then you just sort of repeat that process, I guess. And yeah, that's generally how it goes. Sometimes when we're like really happy with something, I take the time and just like from prototype, I go to a more finalizing stage. Sometimes we work with code on that end. Sometimes I work on my own since I have the coding knowledge. But if I wouldn't have that coding knowledge, then a designer would probably work with a coder and get that process done to a proper state. And at that stage, should also be involving art and animation and whatnot, whatever is needed, basically. But yeah, a lot of the time, most of the time, theoretical. We have this like wiki style board, so we have to write down our ideas on that page, on that stuff. But also like sometimes I work in Google Slides and throw together silly images and stuff, and like that's how I sort of prototype my ideas sometimes. Because like a big part of being a designer is also like you have to present your information, you have to present what's in your head and what you've like taken in, and get it to the rest of the team in a good format and a good manner. So that's been a big part of also like what I do, is just like taking the time and see to it that my designs and stuff are well presented for a lot of the time. And sometimes I just like get down and like I do the Tobias and just like program and really have to focus on this prototyping feature or whatever, and just so it's really varied.
But you write documentation.
I try to.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I try to too.
Yeah. It's not something you like to do, but it's very important.
Yeah.
Agnar, you're a technical designer. Do you have other types of designer, and what's the difference between your role and their role? Or is it just that you also know how to program that sets you apart?
I guess that's a primary difference. My as a technical designer, the title varies greatly depending on what company you're at and whatever. But for me, it's the focus also that I focus on, I guess, the technical aspects, the mechanical aspects, and like getting the mechanics to a good state, and also like being able to hop in and prototype whatever ideas we have quickly is a big part of my role there. But yeah, part of it is my code knowledge as well. But then we have our level designers, and they're it's pretty self-explanatory. They work in the levels and they do blockouts and they do paper prototyping and like set together like how should this look, and then they hop into the engine and move that paper prototype into the engine. Then we have just general gameplay designers and stuff like that. So yeah, it's very varied.
I realized an interesting distinction when Anton talked that I think could be valuable for people to understand. Or that you said like you have a specific graphical thing you need to produce, and you need to like contrast that with the other stuff you have to do, and like find a time slice that makes the most sense to work on this thing. Mm-hmm. And I feel it's quite different for different disciplines sometimes, I feel, because like I as a programmer couldn't take all the time in the world, obviously not, but that's a different sort of loop, because if I work this much and it doesn't work, like the code doesn't work, then it's like irrelevant how well I planned it in my head. And so I guess, and I have never thought about I haven't thought about much at least how it is for other, where like you can polish your graphical assets to the nth degree, but sometimes you have to like just cut it off and like, this is good enough, let's go forward. And that happens with programming as well. Like, this is good enough, I don't need to generalize or rewrite this once again. But sometimes I feel like it's for programmers it's very different. Like, we need this feature, and if it's 1 month later and it's not done or whatever, then we're going to throw more people at the problem, but we need it. And that's the instruction, more or less. It's not like, oh, we need this asset in, and it needs to be done on Tuesday, and you have only that time. I think that's a good distinction to make, to understand that works differently.
Yeah.
That also varies a bit. I mean, it's the agile process, right? That sometimes you have to make the least valuable product, and that also, like, if you have milestone deliveries, you'll have to make whatever work, even though then sometimes maybe you make it work, but it won't work in the long run, I guess. But as long as the milestone's delivered, that's fine.
Yeah,
that's the thing I realized for when it comes to programmers. No one else on the team can actually, put you against the wall, because they don't understand what you do. It's all magic.
Yeah, that's a blessing and a curse. Nobody in your family understand what the hell you're doing, but you can also bullshit everybody if you really wanted to. But yeah, it's a very good point that the agility of game development often like decides how you approach those type of time decisions, and but it's often a little bit different for programmers or that type of thing where something have to work, and it's like, there's no progress bar. It's just, if it works, it works, and that's it. And sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, well, this is good enough. Just out with it and let's move on.
I think it also varies, I guess, from how you plan. Companies do planning in multitude of different ways.
Yeah.
But it's also like, if you're planning like, get this piece of code working like this, then you could work like that as well. But it's also like in when it comes to graphics and artists, I guess it's more easy to like concrete, like, I'm gonna make a barrel. It's gonna take an hour. Cool. but you could also just like plan it in a sense that's like, okay, you have 12 hours, make props that fit into a seaside environment or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's also a difference there, just like how do you present the task, and how does the employee take in the task, and how they work with it.
I mean, that is definitely something, like the briefs that we get as artists, usually we get concepts, right? Somebody has already done the difficult thing, trying to figure out how things are going to look. but from time to time you get the ones like, we need to fill out this environment. It's a seaside environment. Go ham. We need to fill it with stuff, barrels, ropes, boats, throw
Seagulls.
anything. Yeah, seagulls. Throw anything you can. We have these 3 set pieces that we know are going to be there. The rest is like free form. It's up to you. So that's definitely an aspect to it as well. Like, how is the task actually presented versus how do you tackle it? Like, from what end do you start?
Cool. Okay, we've touched upon quite a bit of our other questions here as well, but like with pipeline, and who from the other disciplines do you work with the most? Like, where do you get in touch with other parts of the team, would you say?
I can hook back to what I said about a day, like the thing where, or a designer or something design-like discipline, like there's quite a wide variety there. Graphical artists can almost sometimes like creep into that space for different reasons. So they could be actually like anybody, but anybody who has like a problem that is like, we need this feature in the game, and that usually is designers. So designers for especially tools and systems engineer or programmer is that's the person I talk to the most. That's not my own type of people in my own discipline. Yeah, programmer or a specific type of people. No, not at all. But so yeah, that would be my primary thing. But it like I often talk to our sound engineer, because they had also the problems like, oh, how do we get so this sound plays just as this happens in the game. So for me, it's designers and then everybody who needs problem solved like systematically in the game.
I can imagine that's quite a list of people.
Everybody comes and like, we need this, we need that, and it's supposed to be done yesterday, and like, I'll just go back to my.
Can you fix this? Can you fix that?
Yes. Can you fix this? What's wrong with this? It couldn't be that hard. Yeah, it couldn't be that hard. That's the thing that gets you.
Classic is that everything's prioritized depending on who you are, right? So
yes,
for artists,
yes.
all the art stuff is prioritized, and for designers, all the gameplay is prioritized. For the programmers, all the optimization is prioritized, and then all of a sudden, everything's prioritized, right?
Yes.
Cool. Anton, who do you talk to in a day?
Oof, in a day.
Who do you have to talk to all those other people, as Tobias mentioned?
Yes. Occasionally, I will have to talk to other people. Sadly, no. But yeah, in a day, I usually, we don't really speak that much at the moment, but we take part of each other's work. So, for example, as I mentioned, concept art, it plays a big part in my workflow. We get concept art from our concept artists, and then, of course, we have to sometimes ask questions like, how do you want this to be rendered? What kind of material is this? Etc. etc. We also collaborate quite frequently with level designers and animators. Me as an environment artist, not so much as, for example, maybe a character artist would. Then, of course, I also take part to some extent of the work of the narrative designers. Like, do we need any props in this environment that tell a story? What happened here? What's going to happen here? And so on. And that informs the work that I do. And then, of course, I send my work over to the other environment artists in my team and the tech artists that set up the shaders for the different props and the environments. We have some VFX artists that might add their flair to an environment as well. So there's quite a bunch of people there as well.
But you don't have to talk to Tobias then. You never have any problems.
Most of that is actually handled by level designers, I think. So I go via the level designers, and if they want an event to be triggered or something like that, they can either do that themselves or they send that over to programming, I would say.
It's kind of, in this case, I think it depends a lot of the tool sets you have as a studio. Like if you have a tool set that is in-house built, we had a few quite large in-house tools in at Stanlock, and a lot of them I was not involved in them, but there were a few, and like they could then a graphical artist I just like only talk to on the breaks and lunches and something, then all of a sudden, like, I have this issue. I heard from this and that person that you might know something about this. Like, oh, all right, yeah, I can help you with that. That happened quite a lot. But like I said, if you only use like off-the-shelf things with not a lot of plugins and stuff, then it's usually like more or less less communication on that part, I guess.
Yeah, like you said, that definitely depends on what you're working on at the moment and what tools you have at your disposal, right?
Yeah.
And what you actually work with, and who takes part of what.
Exactly.
Cool. Agnar, do you get to talk to Anton?
Not that much, actually. I don't think I guess the environment part is like the part where I'm least involved, since I'm gameplay stuff. So once again, level designers, hello. But I primarily focus on gameplay stuff and prototyping stuff and theoretical design. So I'm mostly working with, I guess, in my case, the animation side. Making sure that whatever I'm prototyping or whatever I'm gonna eventually, I guess, make to a full-fledged design, making sure it looks good, making sure it feels good to play, and all that stuff. And there you have, of course, have to involve animation, and you have to involve VFX teams and VFX art and stuff like that. So that's where I'm mostly focused on, but sometimes as well there's communication with programming, of course. On my end, not as much, but a lot of it is like, say you're developing a feature that design is going to work with, then since we're going to be working with that feature, if I'm going to be working with some feature, then I want to like make sure it's nice to use, nice to implement, nice to handle in whatever way you want to handle it, but just like be involved with the I guess user experience there as well, with how it is to use and implement into the engine. But yeah, that's I think primarily my communication lines there.
Cool. Let's see, we have some questions coming in from the chat as well. What would you say is the most important thing to think about being a lead in general and an art lead? So what do you think? Who's a good leader? A lead in a game project?
A good lead in general, I would say, is someone who is very communicative and can plan the work. like who can take the vision of the producer, for example, or the designers, and when it comes to art, translate that in like what steps need to be taken to reach the end goal here, and how do we want to divide it, who does what, and also like communicates that efficiently to their team, and can take care of all the other planning things, because of course there's going to be other leads from other disciplines that want to talk to art, for example. Do we need sound for this particular thing? What kind of sound does this make? Maybe the leads will talk to each other, and then my lead will talk to me about, for example, these big metal barrels. We had a talk with audio. Maybe we need to make them into wooden barrels instead, or based on all kinds of different things. And then it is important to have a leader who can communicate that efficiently to everybody in the team. and also take things from the bottom, like from us, and bring that to the people that need to hear the information that we provide as well. So a good flow of information, I guess.
I feel like there's a distinction here because I'm unsure actually what the status quo is to call people, but I feel like sometimes lead and feature owner or producer is a very fluid, mixed up terms. And like I say that because I don't really know exactly where everything falls in those categories sometimes.
That's true.
Sometimes lead, I feel like, can be somebody who is just there personally for your personal development in like, or not maybe at least your personal development in your field. So like, oh, what are you interested in doing in the next project or the next step of this development, and how can we like facilitate the growth that you want to do? Because that's a positive thing to make people like grow as in their fields or like that while they work somewhere. That I feel like is tricky. It's hard to know who's supposed to do that sometimes, and where that comes to, and I guess that's up to different companies. And some people like evolve super much on their own, so they don't really need anybody to like push them to a certain thing. They just need somebody who plans for them, I guess. That's something I guess could be a good lead thing. Somebody who knows where they need to like support people on different things and like what they should do. I'll just leave this person alone with this type of matter because he or she handles that superbly on their own. And also to add something that I think is hard. I personally struggle with this in my current work with my colleague, and that's the thing about lead versus ownership, or versus like feeling of ownership of the thing. So if you have an upper management who decides everything, then you can run the risk of losing inspiration or motivation on your like bottom people, and that just does the stuff. So like having that type of a dynamic where you can like, oh, where do you want to inject your personality as an artist or whatever into this project, so you feel like you're also being a part of this project, not just like a machine who just spits out stuff that they ask for. And I feel like that can be a tricky sometimes, if the lead, how much the lead decides, what they delegate and stuff like that. So I feel like a lead who understands their workforce and understands what they need to like let go of and what they need to control, that is a very important part.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Big plus ones.
Yeah, I have too much to like add. It's been great said so far. I guess a lead for me is like, I guess, the prime number one is like just communication, being a communicative person and being able to also like take in people's thought, understand people in a way, understand who you're working with and how they work as well, like Tobias said, and just like someone who has the big picture of where are we now, where are we going, and just like how do we plan how between these.
Cool. Oh, I spilled my water. It wasn't that much. It's fine.
Hopefully.
Sorry. Very exciting. So, should you take the best, whatever they are, and make them lead? Because I think that's something we see in a lot of.
That's a super good point.
A lot of student projects and a lot of the new projects here in the incubator.
That was honestly my thought when I left the university. Like I thought whoever is the best or slash have worked the longest or had the most experience, they like whoop, now I'm lead all of a sudden. But like the people I've known who have the most experience, they would be like they maybe doesn't really want to take that role and are much more productive as a person who actually does the work. Not that managing people is not work, but actually develop the actual game. And because I also know people who like aren't that super interested in you doing the actual development, but they love like managing people and want to be the best manager for them. So that's a very good distinction. Who is best is not the lead. or best at development or something.
So high skill is not necessary. It's more a leadership position to manage people.
Yeah,
Do we all agree?
I would say so, yeah.
that's it. So yeah, but
Development skill doesn't necessarily translate well into management skill automatically. You can be super knowledgeable about whatever you're actually doing, producing stuff, but you might not be empathic enough to understand your coworkers in that kind of sense that you need to be a lead, for example. And you would also have to weigh the balance, like, okay, if we take our most productive person and we give him all the management tasks, how much work are we actually going to be putting out if we just cut our production in, like, we remove 20%? That goes to management now.
Yeah, that's a super big fall. I don't know, fallgrupp. Super big possible mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and planning takes time.
Yeah, I think
time,
20% sounded like
It's very generous.
Yeah, very small amount of money.
I meant 20% of the output work.
Oh, right.
For
Okay.
entire,
Okay.
like, our team. We're gonna
As-
put that.
Okay, I
Sometimes
thought
planning is also just like throwing a dart at a dartboard and like, oh yeah, we think it's gonna take this. So,
Yeah.
I think it can sort of, I guess, vary between discipline as well, and in how much you need to know.
Yeah.
It's like a programming lead should ideally have pretty good knowledge of all the systems and like how to go forward with them and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, maybe a design lead doesn't have to be an expert on design. They just have to be really good at like communicating the ideas of who's their design team and getting that into one big unit, basically.
Yeah.
That's
so I
a
think
very good point.
There's difference in disciplines there as well.
Yeah.
that's I haven't thought about that, but that's you're right. It's more differences than you realize sometimes between because the lead designer and the lead engineer can both be like people who program. Like at Stanlock, it was that case. Spent most of the time programming almost, but one of them were like obviously much more in depth about that part,
Yeah.
but the other one maybe didn't have the need to be the best the best designer in the even though he or she might be that, it wasn't that kind of a need. Yeah, the communication is much more relevant in that case. I agree. Yeah.
Cool. But on top of that, I guess a lead generally doesn't do most of the decision making, right? I mean, we also have an art director usually and a creative director or a game director. And I think that's something we've seen at least in the student projects earlier, that you think that the game director and the game design lead designer is one role, and that kind of makes it doesn't get much design made out of that one, I guess. Or
No.
do you have any take on that? How do your lead and your art director work together, for example, Anton? What do you say? Who has to say in what?
The art director works together with the game director and producer to like set the tone and scope of environments, for example, and then that gets passed on to the lead, who gets a list of like what needs to be made, what needs to be done, right? And then it's the lead's job, in our case, to plan that and distribute the tasks to the rest of the art team. So we have that kind of upper management decision making, I think, that Tobias mentioned earlier. With, of course, like ideas and feedback are continuously collected from everyone in the development team, but they're always filtered upwards, and then decisions are taken like above lead level at the director level when it comes to bigger decisions. So I would say that art director sets the tone and scope of things, and then the lead distributes the tasks pretty much, in our case.
Cool. Anyone else want to add something to that? You don't have to. We can take the next question.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
I think I'm done.
In our case, it's like the art director is they keep the tone and everything consistent. But it's also a lot of like, in our case, I think the art director and the lead is the same person, which isn't too good. But ideally, you'd want like the separation there. But like the art director has more, I guess, expertise in just like what looks good, and they can give proper feedback on how to like change this to make it look better, or change this to make it fit the style better. While the lead would just more or less be planning and doing that part instead. But when it comes to like who makes the decisions and who really, I guess, designs the game, in our case, I think it's a bit of like collective, I guess, design in a sense, but still we have our game director who sort of fleshes out the rough design of things. And then most of the time this is handed off to the design team and just like, here's an area that's sort of unexplored, fill it up with something, basically. That's sort of generally been the design. So we know sort of what we're going for, but the design team often like goes the extra mile and fleshes it out, make sure it's coherent and has actual content in it, basically.
Cool. Let's see, we only have a few minutes left, so I'll take some of the chat questions. What is the Stack Overflow equivalent for designers? Agnar?
GDC talks, no.
They have somebody, I think, responded with Game Maker's Toolkit.
Yeah, Game Maker's Toolkit is nice as well. I want to also just like playing games is a very good reference. You have a design problem, or you have a design that's similar to some other game. Play that game, and analyze the design and look at what they're doing. And if you can sort of, I guess, not steal it, but copy it or take inspiration from it, then do that. Don't be afraid of doing that.
It's actually quite a subtle thing to realize that like a game design of a game, the design of a game is so like exposed and open to everybody. That's like the point to experience the design. But like and also like graphic assets and stuff and inspiration for that might be also something that where you can just play a bunch of games and get all super good input and stuff.
Definitely.
And programmers are left in the dirt because we don't have there's like this Stack Overflow, but you can't really like, I guess you can pick apart random open source stuff on the internet for fun, but then that's kind of crazy actually.
You can sort of like analyze programming to an extent, but it's like how when a character moves, how does that exactly moving and stuff like that. You can sort of guess at what's going on behind, but it's definitely not as easy as with art or design.
Yeah, true.
I remember something all Game Project 2s at the university tried to do for a while was they were gonna do the Smash Bros camera. I was like, it was like, we're just gonna do the Smash Bros camera, and everyone, it sounded like it's gonna be so easy. But then everyone realized it wasn't that easy to just make it do the thing, and then everything just went super small. Yeah.
Camera design is an art.
Yeah, for sure.
Which leads us to the next thing. What are some common pitfalls when developing games? It's a very broad question. What's the biggest fails in your careers or during your project? Yeah.
Super huge fail. No, not super huge fail. I have something that is just super relevant right now because our game that we're working on right now, I mean, we're gonna get to it, but damn, it's hard to scope stuff. It's really hard to understand what you actually gonna have to do to realize your vision, and sometimes you just like realize halfway through like, damn, this is a huge thing. So like sometimes you hear people like have a saying like, oh yeah, take your idea and then like take 1/10 of it, and it sounds so extreme when you say it like that, but honestly in some cases it's the right thing to do. It's just like, okay, just this tiny aspect of the game still left, let's start with that and let's implement that. And for me, who have been working professionally since 8 years now, I still make the mistake of overscoping my own stuff. It's super hard. I'm a time optimist, I guess, so that's part of the problem.
I can do this. I can finish this. It's fine.
That's me.
Yeah. For me, I guess in the design sense, it's don't over theorize, test things, get people's input, do it in engine. You can throw counter theories or counter designs to stuff against each other forever, but still it doesn't matter in the end if it doesn't feel nice or if it doesn't play nice. So yeah.
In my case, I would say, and this is going to be quite a conundrum because you need to iterate a lot, but you can't iterate too much. There is like try a lot of things, and if something sticks, refine it. And if you can't get it to the level you want it to be, try something else instead of polishing that turd forever, because otherwise you might be wasting valuable time that you could spend developing some other idea or taking your game in another direction that might work way better. So basically kill your darlings and do it fast. Like try stuff, as Agnar said. Don't think too much. Try them out. Do they work? Yes or no?
Yeah, I think a thing we talked about a lot in the last panel, which was aimed towards starting up game projects and running game projects successfully, was find the fun. Make sure that you actually make a game that is fun as soon as possible.
That is a very good idea.
But
also,
continue.
Sorry. Find one thing that's fun and then build off of that one thing. Like you said, Tobias, the 10%, that's like the core of the idea. You can start there and then expand upon it when you've reached a level that you're happy with.
Yeah.
Some of my earlier projects started out with a very fast prototype, like 2 days, and then grew into entire projects that we did with a previous studio. And like that started from the first little piece of fun. We found the fun.
Little spark.
Yeah, the little spark.
Yeah.
The 2% or like 10% of what the game was actually about, and then we could add on to that.
Yeah. To add to your start thing about like not polishing a turd too much, or I think you used the same expression. A different, like a little bit, a different category of the same sort of thing is don't. It's often easy to get stuck on something and not realize you need to like maybe breathe on it a little bit, maybe marinate for a few nights of good sleep or whatever. Take a walk outside, get some fresh air. It's like all of these things which like just breaks up the normal rhythm of just like staring at your screen and like, why doesn't this look good or why doesn't this work? Like just screw it
from the computer.
Go out, put on some headphones, have a nice walk in the sun or whatever, and then like there's so many problems you solve when you're just like not at the computer actually. So that's something that I feel like actually become better at with the pandemic, because like I'm a very I really want to go out at least once or twice a day, and always helps me, and that's motivated by just getting out since everybody's home, and like, oh right, I solved problem as well, win-win, nice, let's continue just walking outside a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, you're sitting at the computer all day, so
yes.
So some breaks would be nice, but in design's case as well, it's like sometimes my best ideas are just like I take a sketch pad or like a notepad and I just sit in my sofa, sit outside and just sketch out ideas and stuff, and then I come back and actually think them over and present them in a more digital format for the rest of the team. But coming up with the ideas and stuff like that is done completely with the computer.
Cool. Okay, we have one last question before we need to wrap up, and that's it's a good one. That's why we're doing it. How much of your day-to-day work is learning how to do it, and how much is actually doing it? How much do you evolve in your profession still as a professional?
For me, especially right now, since we are making everything on 2 people, and there's a lot of stuff that we need to solve that I haven't worked with before, I think it's super fun to try to learn stuff that I don't know yet. So for me, it's almost 50-50 right now. And when I was at Stunlock, I think it was almost also not 50-50, but something around that, because with people around you, you have such a, if you want and if you try, you have such a trajectory of learning new stuff with people around you that are talented, and with the internet. So you can just, and it's just all those small things that you can tweak and to like code faster or find bugs all the small things that you can find every single day, and like try to incorporate and realize that. For me, I switched over to a US keyboard layout. Something I learned, I realized C-style languages is designed for American layouts, and that just like, wow, much faster to program. So that's a thing I learned from nowhere. So I think it's like almost 50-50 sometimes, but yeah, almost 50-50.
For me, it's hard to say, because for design, you can't really look at a design and just say, oh, it's good, oh, it's better than before. So it's like it's hard to know if you're actually getting better, or you're always getting better, like because you're designing more stuff and you're trying out more stuff. But it's like you don't know it in the moment. You know, it's not like, oh, I learned this new programming technique, so now I can do this faster. It's more just like, I guess, looking back at what you've done and just like, I guess, appreciating for what it is and growing on that, basically. But it's very hard to define in the design sense, which is interesting in like contrast to how it is for programming, for example.
Yeah. Anton?
I would say that depends a lot on where you are in your like development cycle, and like most of the day, I would say my day to day is about 98% doing the thing and 2% learning the thing, and then every once in a while a day comes along where you invert those two numbers and you have to figure out how to overcome a very specific obstacle, for example, or how to render something in a very specific way that the art director wants you to do, and then you have to like go down the rabbit hole, like find documentation for Maya, for example. How do you do this specific thing? How do you create this specific asset? Might look up, like, I don't know how much learning it is to look up references, for example, but in a sense, that's, you know, you're adding things to your visual library as an environment artist. But when it comes to just producing things on a day-to-day basis, I would definitely say that I spend most of my time doing it and less time learning it, even though I've done a lot of learning to get to the point where I'm at today. You always learn.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting. I would say it depends on where in the project you are. Like when you're starting to a new project and doing pre-production and coming up with a new, well, with the art style and stuff like that, I guess you do a lot of research and testing new things, and then after that you're supposed to do it, right? Because you don't want to start developing your art style mid game. We did that for our first project. I remember Bloodline Champions. Our artists got better at trees, so they updated the trees, but then everything else looked bad compared to the new cool trees. We had to update everything again. But I was also...
That kind of ties back to the don't iterate too much.
I think I want to correct myself a little bit, because when you said followed up, I realized 50-50 is way too much learning. Then I realized when I thought about it during your talk, that like, no, that's not really the case. As a programmer, you spend so much time just looking at what's wrong with your code. So it's like that just trumps everything else to begin with. You code much less than you actually look for the problem. But sometimes it's all. I think Anton said like once in a while you come up with a day or a few days where you like just learn so much in a few days because you need to like get into this new thing. That's probably the most likely day for me as well. Like sometimes you just like go at it and then you do it for a few weeks or so. Yeah.
Cool. And that is all the questions I have for today. Do you have anything specific you want to send with all these aspiring game devs out there planning to join the industry?
Ooh,
best
I
tip?
have something.
Yeah.
Have something. It relates to Tobias' anecdote about going outside and just getting fresh air. And Agnar said we sit in front of the computer all day. Be mindful of your ergonomics. Like, make sure you sit properly, take breaks, do all the good things, and take care of yourself, because that's gonna be a very good thing to do in the long run.
Yeah, I would say I totally agree with that. I have one of these because of that. A broken keyboard. Nobody likes it except for me. Yeah, exactly. So it's actually really important. And I would add to that, like, sometimes you just gotta try stuff. So don't be afraid to, know that you might fail, especially when you're at school. Don't listen too much to old farts like me or whatever. Just like try stuff and break your own bones. I don't know what to say, but sometimes it's good to try out stuff even though you might fail, and we shouldn't discourage that with too much. Oh, it's too scopy or whatever. Just try stuff sometimes. Also, it's important to push.
Yeah.
Agnar, any words of wisdom?
Ooh, it's more just like, I guess, community based, but just engage with the game dev community, engage with the people around you. I think the game dev community is really like beautiful place, especially once you get talking to people and talking to everyone who's working and all their different ideas, and just getting to experience what's going on. I think it's beautiful, and take care of that and nurture it.
Definitely.
Yes.
Fantastic final words, especially for me as the community overlord of Sweden Gamer Net. I feel very appreciated. Thank you, Agnar. And thank you, Tobias and Anton, as well, of course, for joining this panel. And I hope all of you who joined us as viewers have gotten some answers to your questions about what it's like to work as a game dev. And we hope to see you soon. Next panel should be at the end of May. More info will be coming up. So, bye, people.
Great.
Bye-bye. Thank you for your time.
Där är den.